Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Reparations is political truth serum. No matter what people may try to claim, when it comes to reparations, it's simply too much of a game changer for people to hide their opposition to it. It forces everybody to show exactly where they really stand. Neither Gavin Newsom nor the Democratic Party leadership ever thought that this day would come. Gavin and his pals in the California political machine set up the Reparations Task Force to be just another recommendations panel that would at most say that there need to be more programs for all the disadvantaged and all the rest of the regular empty rhetoric. But instead, you have the grassroots out there, people like Brother Tariq, who made sure that reparations was correctly defined as being for the people who came out of slavery in the U.S., and that compensation was defined squarely as cash. This despite the best, or rather worst, efforts of bootlicking traitors like Amos Brown, who, by the way, is the so-called pastor of the church that Kamala Harris went to when she lived in San Francisco and was busy locking black people up full-time. So now that the plan hasn't gone according to plan, Newsom is already saying he doesn't support cash reparations. Now, when dealing with these crooked banks who brought the country and the world to the brink of a second Great Depression, did the government give them social programs or housing vouchers or police reform? No, they got money. Recently, you had those banks in California like Silicon Valley Bank who went under. Did their multimillionaire depositors get social programs or housing vouchers? No, they got money. Newsom made it clear he opposes cash reparations, but he started feeling the heat, and now he's issued a new statement where he's trying to make it seem like, oh, well, all I was saying is that I'm going to give all the recommendations of the task force consideration, which is a lie. Gee, when's the last time that you saw somebody out there in California do a 180 like this on the issue of opposing cash reparations? Oh, that's right, Amos Brown. And just in case you doubt that Newsom is and has always been opposed to reparations, in his little follow-up he dropped this pile of empty words like breaking down barriers to vote, bolstering resources to address hate, enacting sweeping law enforcement and justice reforms, strengthening economic mobility, improve equity in housing, education, and health care. Gee, that sounds just like the same pile of crap Biden and Harris were talking about with their Lift Every Voice plan, which, by the way, they still haven't done. So even if you are stupid enough to fall for the Democrats' word salad, it still won't take you anywhere. Nowhere in Newsom's list of empty rhetoric does he address money for black Californians. And that's the point. He leaves the word black out entirely. Instead, all he lists are the usual grab bag of do-nothing policies that white Democrats are interested in because it's going to increase and enhance their power. When he says breaking down barriers to vote, that means making sure illegal aliens can vote in all statewide elections in California, because it has nothing to do with black Californians. What he's talking about is making it easier for the Nuri Martinezes and the Kevin DeLeons and other assorted racists to get into office and to hold on to those offices. This is the Democrats giving a gift to themselves and then falsely claiming that they bought it for us. As far as bolstering resources to address hate, when Asians complained about hate crimes, they didn't just bolster resources for them. The main thing they did was to start prosecuting people. Black Californians need a hate crimes law specifically for black people, and then they need those laws to be aggressively enforced. Black folks in California don't need a hug or some so-called hotline. They don't need any phony sympathy from the likes of Gavin Newsom. What they need are for the prosecutors to finally start doing their jobs. And speaking of which, enacting sweeping law enforcement and justice reforms, investigating these police departments and sheriff departments to root out those anti-black racists, these white supremacist gangs and the Latino gangs in these police and sheriff's departments, that's what's called for. But that's not what Newsom's talking about. And in San Francisco, they had a text messages scandal, and you had Asian police officers in San Francisco who were talking about targeting black residents. The only reform the police need is harsh punishment, and punishment means prison time. Long prison time. And the same goes for these DAs. But when Newsom says reform, that means the same thing Biden meant when he said it. It means more money for the thugs in blue, and with no strings attached. Biden slammed his gums a lot about police reform when he was on the campaign trail in 2020, but the only thing that came out of that was more money allocated to the police, mostly from COVID. Biden promised a White House-level police oversight committee, And the instant he won the election, he immediately turned around and said, well, I'm just too busy for that. Let Congress handle it. And that was the last anyone ever heard of it. As for strengthening economic mobility, that means nothing at all. Improve equity in housing. Remember, if you're renting, then they consider you to be housed. Black people in California are demanding home ownership. They want to be able to own the places they live in. And for the younger set, they're demanding that the doggone rents be brought down because, as that political party out there has named itself, the rent is too damn high. But that's not what Gavin Newsom's talking about. You see him talking about rental rates or talking about home ownership. He's not mentioning that at all. All they're talking about is getting you to be able to give some white landlord or real estate interest your money. What's going to be done to punish landlords who discriminate against black tenants? What's going to be done to punish these appraisers who keep lying and telling black homeowners that their houses are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars less than they really are? Nothing. He's not talking about that at all. These are all weasel words you see here in this statement. They don't actually mean anything. But the point is that whoever reads it, it's supposed to be so vague that your imagination is allowed to fill in the blanks, and the blanks are legion. You see words like improve housing equity and your imagination gets running and you start thinking it has to do something with home ownership or building equity when they never said that it did. Education and healthcare has to do with illegal immigrants getting access to those things. Now, you know what's missing from this empty pile of talk. The word black. That's what's missing. This is supposed to be his recommendations for what to do about reparations for black people, but he doesn't even have the decency to put the word black in there because he ain't thinking about black people. Not one of these things Newsom claimed to be working on mentions black people at all. Nothing says breaking down barriers to black people voting. It just says vote in general. Bolstering resources to address hate doesn't say hate against black people. Now, when they were talking about the Asians, they mentioned them specifically. They didn't just mention hate crimes in general. They said Asian hate crimes. This deracialized, colorblind bullcrap, that's what Biden did 3 years ago, is what Obama did before him and all the others before them. When these people are running for office, they already know what their goal is to make sure that black people get nothing. That's why they use all this vague, empty chatter. Remember, the Democrats got caught back in 2016 sending out that memo to their candidates saying, don't promise black people anything. Don't promise any support for concrete policies. Yeah, just keep giving black people empty talk, which is what they did in 2016. And they lost. And now I think it becomes a lot clearer to everyone why that pork chop preacher Amos what's-his-name was so eager to toe the line for the Democrats in California, and why he was leading the charge to say no cash reparations. He didn't just poo-poo the idea offhand. He was sent to do that. And as for Gavin Newsom, he's done nothing but poo-poo the entire idea of reparations in general and cash reparations in specific. He's not recommending reparations at all. It's just more social programs for everyone. Now, for all the trolls who tell us that we need to vote for the Democrats or we're not going to get anything at all, this is what you want us to vote for. When Gavin pulled that PR stunt with Bruce's Beach, he and that gaggle of racist bureaucrats knew exactly how that was going to turn out. The land had long ago been zoned so that it couldn't be developed, which meant that the black inheritors of Bruce's Beach wouldn't be able to derive any revenue from it. All they would be able to do is pay taxes on it or sell it. But they couldn't turn it into generational wealth. That means the land pays for itself. You have something that generates income and you can hand that asset over to your children. They already made sure from the beginning that wasn't going to happen. Too many black people get impressed when some white Democrat makes a couple of grunts about what he claims he's going to do for us. And if you want to know how much Newsom's word is worth when it comes to talking about housing equity, remember, that guy was the mayor of San Francisco a few years back. What did he do about the cost of housing in San Francisco? What did he do about building more housing when he was the mayor of that city? No, he did exactly like Willie Brown before him and London Breed after him, and that is to preside over the ethnic cleansing of black people out of the city. The white media is trying to act like armchair economists on this issue, running interference for Newsom, saying, well, California's bill to compensate black residents could top $800 billion, an amount that far exceeds the state's annual budget. Now, there's nobody talking about how much the DACA program costs, the cost of housing and feeding and transporting illegal aliens. Nobody's talking about the cost of supporting Ukraine being prohibitive. With everyone else, the white media doesn't pinch pennies. But when talking about us, they suddenly decide that, won't somebody think about the budget? Okay, fine then, we put California on the installment plan. They got 10 years to pay it off. Now that ought to be fine with anybody, but I bet you the white media looking going, that's still too much. The white media is not about to write stories where they talk to experts who will say, hey, this is doable. This is what's owed, and here's how the state can pay the money out. Instead, they do the Enos the Idiot routine and say, gee, that sure is a lot of money. Not as much money as they've made off of us. Not as much money as we've been robbed of. The math is simple. Don't do the crime if you can't pay the dime. We're up against an organized offense here. That includes both Democrats and Republicans. What's going on is the political equivalent of a prevent defense. They know that we're making this demand and that it's not going away. But as the Gavin Newsoms and Marianne Williamsons see it, they've heard black people make this demand before. They've heard a number of demands from black people, and each and every time, we've gone away. All they had to do was wait us out. The next police murder or the next sports championship, and black folks will move on to something else. They're making a huge wager that things will work out the same way this time too. But I think that's a wager they're going to lose. This is going to be a process, not an event. You have the trolls, white supremacists, tethers, agents who will try to tell us, oh, this is not going to happen. Y'all should just give it up. And they were the same ones who said reparations would never be seriously discussed either. They were wrong then, they're wrong now. What they hate is that this is happening at all, because they bet all their chips on white power, and white power is the racial pyramid that we're forced to live under. If that changes, then everything changes. What is called for here is perseverance and persistence. That California Reparations Task Force had their orders, that this was supposed to be just another grab-bag social program slate. But the black grassroots got busy out there, and they made their presence felt. It's the very definition of forcing the system to do something it wasn't designed to do. And that was to apply reparations to a lineage. Make no mistake, if reparations had been defined as being for all black people no matter when they got here, I can promise you it would have immediately been applied to all immigrants, period. That's how it would have worked. It would have maintained the racial wealth gap, which was exactly the trick that they were attempting to pull in the first place. But that got thwarted. And so you had the pulpit punk Amos Brown, who they sent out with orders to sabotage the whole thing, and he needs to say, ain't no need for no cash reparations, that ain't realistic. And with Gavin Newsom now saying the same thing, it's not very hard to figure out who gave that wrinkled up civil rights retread his marching orders. Gavin Newsom wants the Democratic Party and America in general to look at him as a presidential contender. Now, coming from California, you know full well that just like Kamala Harris, he's made a ton of promises to those West Coast white supremacists that he would maintain the racial pecking order at all costs. So his current behavior is disgusting, but it's hardly surprising. We all knew this was going to happen. And one more thing, whenever you see these other groups who claim that they don't owe reparations because they had nothing to do with enslaving us, you make sure to remind them of the racism they practice in their own home countries against black people there, and remind them that they bring that same anti-black racism to the U.S. as well. When you act like the dominant society and identify as the dominant society, then you get lumped in with the dominant society. We have no friends, so we shouldn't be bothered that anyone else doesn't like what we're doing. Some of you are self-conscious about that, and you shouldn't be. The racial pecking order mandates that black people be kept at the bottom, not because we don't work hard. We work harder than anyone else. We built the country and made it prosperous. The mandate is not based on us doing anything wrong. It's based on us being black, because anti-black racism is the unifying principle of white supremacy. It's the ideological glue that holds this entire putrid satanic enterprise together. But they have to justify it somehow, and that justification is, well, black people are in the economic position they're in because of something they did. They have to make it our fault somehow. I explained to you a couple of weeks ago that black farmers had 20 million plus acres of land at the beginning of the 20th century, but by the end of the century, we had almost none. That's not because of mismanagement. You can't get that kind of total and complete loss of land without it being taken from the people who have it. And I also explained who was doing the taking and how they were doing it in that video. Our position in the society is no accident at all. It's been socially engineered. Anti-black racism is the proof that the machine of white supremacy is still operating well. When I say that the beneficiaries of white supremacy demand proof every single day that the white supremacy machine is still in place and still producing for them, that proof takes the form of black impoverishment. They pretend to complain about it, but in reality, they're gloating. They're reveling in it. Because the white supremacist house of cards is still standing, and they think it's not in danger of being knocked over. They don't judge their position in the world by how well they're doing. They judge it by how poorly black people are doing in comparison. If they're driving a 30-year-old beat-up pickup truck, they're fine with that, just so long as black people don't have a car at all. And if they don't have a car, that's fine, so long as black people can't even afford bus fare. What's at work here is the reassurance that white has value, because that's what white supremacy did. It used force of arms in order to deprive black people of resources and to reward those classified as white. This way, you can artificially give white value. Oh, you have what you have because of white skin. And how can we say that? Well, look at the things you have. Clearly, white must be special. The system of goodies, giveaways, and guarantees based solely on race, and that the white media glorifies. This is a battle of wills taking place. Those of you who think that forcing the system to do things it wasn't designed to do is going to be easy, anyone who comes around here with that old defeatist talk, you'll be immediately blocked. These are the people who the closest they've come to making a demand from the government is applying for an EBT card. Over here in Black Empowerment, we don't let the lazy or the ignorant speak, not on issues this important. They don't know what it means to actually have to take on the machine. They want the fight to be over in time for them to catch the latest episode of Love and Hip Hop. Well, fighting white supremacy doesn't work like that. Hell, most of them haven't contributed anything to the cause anyway. They're sitting back waiting for somebody else to fight for their benefit. We don't listen to or waste time with people like that. The Democrats are betting that we'll lose focus and go away because historically we always have. Amos Brown's generation certainly did, and as we see, that civil rights fossil has thrown his lot in with the enemy, and he's now one of the biggest mouthpieces against us. This issue was never supposed to get this far, and it was never supposed to be addressed specifically for us either. Even if they gave us reparations tomorrow, we'd still be demanding tangibles, because everyone else gets it without having to ask at all. But as I told you, reparations is political truth serum. People who claim to be so radical just mention cash reparations and all of a sudden they'll become the biggest conservative establishment types you ever saw. Bernie Sanders certainly ran away with his tail tucked between his legs. And while we're on the subject of people who run, where is Big Bird at right now? Oh, he does interviews with Kamala Harris and the Democrats, and he hangs out with MSNBC personalities like Joy Reid. So with real movement on cash reparations taking place in California, and as the old saying goes, as goes California, so goes the nation, shouldn't Big Bird, who claimed to be the leader of the oldest reparations advocacy group in America, be raising hell about this? If the issue is, as the white media terms it, a governor's signature away from happening, then shouldn't Big Bird be out in front of the cameras in California advocating for it? I thought NCOBRA was the real reparations advocacy group. But they've been MIA on this one because they were controlled opposition all along. The last time Big Bird stuck his head up was out there in Nashville with those two Democratic shills when they did their PR stunt in the Tennessee Capitol. Big Bird has plenty of time to go out to Tennessee and take a stroll with those two Democratic Party operatives. He has time to hang out there and help stump for the Democrats, but when Joy Reid talked to him about it, he didn't say one word about reparations, and he's not saying a word about it now. He's a Democratic Party operative whose job is to get us away from reparations and instead thinking about how we can help this or that political prostitute get into office. And he's not alone. For all you fools in my comment section telling me how much you claim Big Bird did for the cause, you're seeing it right now, and you can have several seats while you're at it. These so-called leftist policies are just the same old white right-wing policies with a little social justice rhetoric sprinkled on top. What we're demanding actually changes things, so you see the Democrats and Republicans both in lockstep against us. And that's fine. I'm far more interested in what we're going to do than in what the enemy is doing. What you see the enemy doing, this is what must happen in order for the wall of injustice to come down. But never forget, if we fight, we win. Just keep in mind, this fight's not going to be some quick knockout in the first round. The enemy has a huge head start and enormous resources. We're going to have to chop them down. But chop we will. At this point, what we have to do is to show our resolve, not just for what's going on in California, but nationwide. Black empowerment is not some easy stroll through the park. It is a long, hard fight, and you're going to find out pretty early whether or not you're built for this or not. But if we're going to have any sort of future at all, then we had better ante up, grab our boots, put on our gear, and accept the fact that before we can have any kind of victory, first, there's going to have to be a long, hard fight. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Deborah Gallman, Wesley Monroe, Alan Reese, Jasmine B., and Sean. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.